Hi, everybody. This is Bev Redman. I'm the Division Director in the Office of Recap for closing and post-closing. And I'm so glad you could join us today. We are going to be talking about navigating post-closing RAD requirements and how we're processing things that you need to do. I'm just going to be giving the couple of introduction ideas here today. And then we'll be joined by Isabella Cabbage-Stock, who's the branch chief for post-closing. And Will Levy is around. He'll be listening too. So if you have any questions that you might want to throw his way, I'm just giving him a little plug. Then we also have joining us today, Belinda Koros from the Office of Asset Management and Portfolio Oversight. She'll be talking to you about some of the items that affect multifamily housing relationship when you do a PBRA conversion. And Cheryl Fox from the Office of Public and Indian Housing, and she will be discussing some of the post-closing things that need to be considered when you have gone with a PBV Section 8 contract after your RAD conversion. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and the slides will be posted to the RAD resource desk within 48 hours. And we are going to take questions at the end. The best way to ask a question is to use the raise your hand function, and we'll then unmute your line. But if you type in your question, we'll do our best to get to it. And if we don't, we'll follow up with email, using email after the webinar. We've been spending a lot of time working out processes and requirements that we can share with you today, and through our new published guide. The guide is going to be a living document. It will be updated as and if needed. And as we continue to work through additional scenarios or policy refinements in the RAD conversion process. Next slide, please. So this is our agenda for today. We're talking about RAD conversions from public housing. That's what RAD 1 refers to. And it's the post-closing requirements. Just after closing, there are some things you must do, and then there are other things you have to do a little further down the road. And then there is a list of things that you might need to reference if certain things occur during the life of the project. I also want to, at this point, say to you that you can avoid a lot of post-closing problems by paying attention to your closing documents, especially looking at your CHAP for number of units, for your rents, and for your utility allowances, and look at your scope of work for what you are budgeting to do and what you have committed in your conversion commitment to complete. So without further ado, I guess the last thing I want to say is we'll remind you about your existing post-closing resources. And again, at the end, we will take questions. I would like to hand this over to Isabella Cabbage-Stock to start our more content here.
Thanks, Bev. Appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this webinar where we're going to discuss some RAD post-closing responsibilities, some things that we already have in place, and some new things. And we're going to give you a little preview of our post-conversion processing guide that we have recently uploaded to the resource desk. So first, after closing, the upload of the final closing docket. This should be done immediately after closing or no later than 10 days following your HAP effective date. And of course, you're going to upload that to the RAD resource desk. The completion certification. So for completion certifications, once you've completed the rehab work that's detailed in your RCC, then for those transactions that had rehab, their completion cert is due no later than 45 days after the rehab period specified in your RCC. For no rehab deals, your completion certification is due 10 days of the effective date, 10 days after the effective date, 10 days of the effective date of your RAD HAP contract. Also, sorry about that. The no rehab certification only applies to deals that closed after September 5th, 2019. RAD post-closing expectations. So, what do we expect? Well, we expect for you to do the work that is detailed in Exhibit D of your RCC within the time frame specified in the RCC. We also expect that you tell us, which is why we want the completion cert. Tell us that you did the work. Of course, for rehab work, within 45 days of completing the RAD scope of work, we anticipate that you will log into the resource desk and submit the completion certification, verifying that all work has been completed as detailed in Exhibit D of your RCC. For LIHTC transactions, you do not, let me say that again, you do not have to wait for your LIHTC certification to submit the RAD completion certification. We want your completion certification once your work has been completed, so you don't have to wait the 6 months or however long before you get your certification, your LIHTC certification, in order to submit the completion certification via the resource desk. Okay, so you closed the RAD deal, but what if, oh my God, I found a mistake in my HAP contract. Oh, I under-budgeted my scope of work. It's taken forever to complete this construction. You know what? I don't think I want to be an owner for this transaction. Or I missed my OCAF adjustment deadline. No worries. We have a way to solve all of these problems. Introducing dun, 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 the new RAD post-conversion processing guide. The processing guide is located on the RAD resource desk. You go to the document library under post-closing, and you should see the post-conversion processing guide. Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot of some of the information that you can find in the processing guide. So the processing guide is divided into 7 sections, and for each section, we've outlined various post-closing scenarios. For each scenario, the guide identifies who your primary point of contact is, depending on the conversion, the type of conversion, submission timing, submission requirements, and which includes what to submit and how to submit. For example, uploading to the resource desk or via email to a specific inbox. Next slide, please. Well, who do I contact once I find out that there's a problem? So if your RAD scope of work is incomplete, for corrections of errors in any legal transactional documents, you're going to start with the Office of Recap. If you've completed your RAD scope of work and you need to make changes to any of the legal or transactional documents, if it's PBRA, your point of contact would be the assigned account executive and or resolution specialist. If it's a PBV contract, then you're going to contact the PIH office. Here's a little reminder that we kind of slid in here. If your transaction included FHA insured FHA insured mortgage, or the RAD transaction was seeking an FHA insured mortgage, you should always notify your account executive in addition to recap, but also coordinate with the FHA side to make sure that they are aware of any changes. Okay, primary points of contact, Office of Recap. So, if you have questions about your final closing documents, RAD completion certification submission questions, correcting errors, on closing documents. You have questions about your funding, completing or modifying a delayed conversion agreement, rehab assistance payments, changes in scope of work, versions to perm, release of DOTs or DORCs after closing, or if you would like to get your property released from a restrictive covenant that was put on at closing. These are some examples of some of the things that are covered in our new post-closing guide. So the next question, well, I need to make a change, but how do I do this? So how do you make a change or update information? How do you make a submission? You're going to submit online via the RAD resource desk. You go to specific transaction, say Arborview Apartments. You want to click on the transaction pages button at the top. Once you get the drop down, I think it's the third menu item from the bottom, you will see post-closing processing. And it should bring you up to the post-closing processing page, which we have captured here, and you can begin your submission. At this point in our webinar, I am handing it off to Cheryl Fox, who's going to go over some PIH requirements for post-closing.
Hi, thank you, Isabella. This is Cheryl Fox from the Office of Urban Revitalization in OPHI. I'm going to talk about some of the items specific to PBV that are handled by PIH. So the first involves reporting on funding. So as you know, in the year of conversion, funding goes through the public housing program. In the following year, starting with January 1st, funding goes through Section 8. If you have any issues or problems with this conversion or with your new Section 8 funding, you should contact PIH. And we have a new mailbox, which I'm going to show you the address for. So all you need to do is send a request to the new mailbox. Now, if you have changes or updates or adjustments that are needed to your HAP contract, this is much more unusual. But in some cases, we know that you will need a change. For instance, the ownership of the property might be changing. You would need a change to your HAP contract. If for some reason you are refinancing a part of your RAD project, which would affect part of the units that are under a HAP, that would require a change to your HAP contract. Those kind of items will be handled by PIH. Again, you would send a note, a request to the PBV mailbox. This is not a correction to your HAP contract. If there's a problem with your HAP contract, that's something that you should notice right away, or in the beginning, and that you should refer to recap. Another issue that you would work with PIH on is OCAP adjustments. Again, anything really that has to do with the ongoing operations of your project once the initial transfer through the RAD process has occurred is going to go through PIH. So in the case of OCAP adjustments, if the OCAP adjustment is being made on the annual anniversary date, if it's for the amount of the HUD published OCAP adjustment as modified if necessary by the reasonable rent calculation, if it's being done either by the PHA or by its independent entity, as is required under your contract, and in many cases, if that's all going sort of normally, that's done by the PHA. But if there are any questions about it, if there's a need to adjust the rent increase by a different amount to increase it up or to increase it down, you're going to need to contact HUD for approval. And that, again, would be submitted to the mailbox. Same with the same concept applies to deposits and withdrawals from the reserve for replacement account. If the deposit is being made as required by the RCC, adjusted by the inflation factor year after year, being made as normal, then it's just processed through the PHA acting as the contract administrator. There shouldn't really be any issues, but if there's a need to do something different, then you should either the owner or the PHA, preferably the PHA, should contact the mailbox, and you will reach the appropriate person within PIH who can help you with it. If it's a question, answer your question. If you need an approval to make a change to the amounts, then that would come in through the mailbox. And similarly with withdrawals, if withdrawal from the reserve for replacement is within the requirements either of your tax credit investor or another investor, that's fine. If it's for an expense that's on the long-term work plan, then that should be fine. But if the PHA has a question over whether it's a permissible use of the replacement reserve or not, then that should be sent to the mailbox. And finally, generally, if there's a major refinancing, if there's a major rehab going on, if there's new construction going on, if there's changes to the public housing project, those are going to be made during the course of the RAD conversion. But we know in some cases, these changes need to happen after the conversion has already occurred. Sometimes a PHA or an owner entity might get access, for instance, to 9% tax credits, that it had been trying for, but that it didn't have at the time of conversion. Maybe there's a new opportunity that comes up. Maybe there's a local process underway. There's a variety of reasons where a major renovation, even new construction, a major change would be made, or a minor change. We've had some minor changes too, where there was a finding of an environmental problem and local funding was made available for in order to correct the problem, but it required a change to the financing for the project. So in any case where there's a desire to change ownership, there's a desire to refinance the existing financing, there's new financing that wants to be added to the project, and really any kind of lien that you would want to put on the project that isn't there now, or any change that would involve the ownership documents, you're going to need to have HUD approved. Again, you're going to send that to our mailbox. We have some guidance that will be updated actually very soon on this process for restructurings. And you can find that through the new guidance that RECAP has published. And it's also available on the RAD resource desk. Let's go to the next slide, please. Great. Okay. So, as I just said, see the guide for the specific submission requirements, and this is very important. This is the mailbox. So this is where you send your requests, your questions, anything that you need to communicate with HUD PIH about. Send to this mailbox. If you've got an existing relationship with your field office, your issue goes to your field office representative, go ahead and send it to them. But if it's any of these issues that I'm talking about, it should go through the mailbox. And at this point, I will turn it over to Belinda Koros to talk about PBRA.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Belinda Koros, the Assisted Housing Oversight Division Director here in headquarters. We are part of the Office of Asset Management and Portfolio Oversight. We work with the field offices to ensure that there's funding available for the Section 8 renewal contracts, HAP contracts, and provide, guidance and policy information to the field offices. For your resource, the account executive at the local field office, when you have a project-based rental assistance contract or an FHA insured mortgage, that account executive that is assigned to your property is your main point of contact. And the things that the field office will oversee for you include the Section 8 vouchering process, the issues that might revolve around submitting the monthly voucher to receive payment. This vouchering process is very different from the process that happened on the PIH side. And so we have developed some resources for you all to use to onboard quickly into the multifamily process and compliance requirements with the Occupancy Handbook 4350.3. The field offices will help you with adjustments or updates to the HAP contract. We've had some issues like with utility allowances, making sure the correct utility allowance is established, and we're focusing on that fact to try to get it correct on the HAP contract before closing. But if there is an issue, that would be something you would coordinate with your account executive. Annually, you'll submit an OCAF rent adjustment, and we'll process that signed rent schedule as part of that annual process to establish the new rents. They will work with you regarding your reserve for replacement account. So monthly, you'll make a deposit to your reserve for replacement account, and they will also be the one to review the quarterly releases that you're eligible for to submit from the reserve for replacement account. And that's one of the big things that you do with your account executive is processing reserves for eligible capital replacement items. Some of the things that might happen in new financing or modifications to the existing financing after the RAD scope of work is completed. So if you enter into a new mortgage or modify your existing mortgage, if that mortgage is FHA insured, you've got to receive HUD's approval prior to any modifications. And if you go out and get a conventional mortgage after the fact, then we'll coordinate with you you probably want consent to the assignment of the HAP contract. So your account executive will work with you on getting those documents for you. If you change your management agent, that requires new management agent documents. So the field office approves the management certification, the management entity profile, your management agreement, and the previous participation for that management agent, the Form 2530. And then also if there are any changes in your ownership structure. This could be a change in the managing member if you are a limited liability company, or a change in a partner if you're a partnership entity, or if you are a nonprofit board of ownership, if you have a change in the principals, the board of directors, that may also require HUD's prior approval. So I would encourage you to reach out to your account executive on any of these types of issues. We are with you for the long haul of this HAP contract. So for the entire term, we will be your partner to work with you for compliance with the contract. And the post-closing guide that has been introduced today includes reference information, the requirements for preferences, and your submissions are generally processed through the field office via email. If you send your information to this mailbox, each field office has an incoming mailbox, and we've given you the example of Atlanta's incoming mailbox, atl.incoming@hud.gov. Each field office has a mailbox like this, and we're going to supplement the post-closing guide with that information, so it'll be on the resource guidebook for resource website for your reference. But if you send your reserve for replacement request, your management agent change, your OCAF rent increase, you send it through this website, it will get into our mail log system and will be assigned to the current account executive. There is also, if you don't know who your account executive is and are wanting to know that information, each field office will have a website which lists the projects that are in the portfolio, and you can go to that list and we'll provide you with links to this table. And then you can look your project up and find out who your account executive is and what their email address is. So you may just have a general question that you want to send to your account executive. But at the closing, you generally know who that person is because they're working with you through the closing. So any questions that you have at this information, I'll be happy to assist. And I am not sure who I am handing off to now for the next slide.
That
Okay.
would be me, Belinda. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Isabel.
Okay, so we just have a few more reminders of existing RAD post-conversion resources. Of course, the one that this presentation was about, our new post-conversion processing guide. Again, that's available on the RAD resource desk. We also have instructions for final docket submission. Instructions for your submitting your completion cert. Instructions for requesting PPV OCAF adjustments. Some guidance for PIH for owners, PIH guidance for owners seeking to refinance PBV RAD developments. We have the PBV Quick Reference Guide and also the newly released PBRA Quick Reference Guide. All of these documents can be found in the document library under post-closing on the RAD resource desk. Okay, so we're at the end of our program. If you have any questions, again, either raise your hand or submit your questions via the chat. You can review the post-conversion processing guide at www.radresource.net in the document library, post-closing guidance. So I'm guessing now we'll open it up for questions. We encourage you to raise your hand. And as indicated at the beginning of the program, if you type your question in, if we don't get a chance to get to it during the time allowed, we will respond via email.
Great, thanks, Isabella. So we're going to go ahead. We've got a couple hands raised. Michelle O'Meara, you'll need to unmute your line.
Sorry, I think I did that accidentally, but thank you anyway.
Oh, no problem. Okay. Great. Let me lower your hand. Looks like we've got Jewel Walton. You are on the air. Jewel, do you have a question for us?
I do. Hi, this is Jewel Walton from the Chicago Housing Authority. CHA is going through their portfolio award and about halfway through, and we are definitely focused on kind of the administrative side and the post-closing environment. Just wanted to ask, and I have not had an opportunity to read this, but I will surely read it cover to cover. But what is there anything happening as it relates to on the PBV side, so with PIH, with the monitoring of reserve spend and against what was in the original PCNA for improvement schedule?
That's a great question, Cheryl.
Yeah. So this is a place where you need to be proactive, and if there are all of the items that are included in your PCNA are eligible for reserve for replacement funding. If you want to use the reserves for something that is not in, this year's allocation and this year's plan, then you need to contact PIH.
So you anticipate that like our capital planning efforts should essentially be facilitated through the office?
We anticipate that we're anticipating that you're using the plan that was established during the CNA process.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand that that's not going to be 100%. There are going to be times when you're going to have to speed something up, or you're going to have to, attend to an issue that's later in the plan, now, and an issue that's now is going to need to be put off for a year. And that's when you would contact HUD, and you can use that email address to reach us.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jewel. All right, it
Joel,
looks like
I'll just
Bob.
add that, sorry, just to add, we haven't yet sent a RAD blast out. You guys are hearing it first that the PBV and PBRA quick reference guides have been updated and are on the resource desk. But there is a brief section that talks about replacement reserves for PBV in that reference guide. So Joel should also point you to that.
Great, thanks, Will. All right, looks like we have another question from Bob Landry. Bob, I think your line is, I think you have to unmute your phone so you can ask it. Bob? Are you out there? Okay, we'll come back to him. We've got another question from Sharon Carlson. Sharon, do you have a question? I've unmuted your line.
Did you say Sharon Carlson? Hello?
Yes. Hi.
Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
I do think that I hit my raise the hand by accident, but I do have just a comment. We've gone through the conversion, and we're in the post-conversion phase and implementing some of the changes that have occurred with rents, and I'm going to say specifically with those residents who have a little bit higher income. And so transitioning from total tenant payment or to total tenant payment is an ordeal for some of these folks who have a little bit more income because they were capped previously at flat rent. So that learning curve of how to phase them in from their prior rent to ultimately what would be the total tenant payment or capped at the tax credit rent at the 60% AMI for our area. It's presented some challenges, but it seems to be a very confusing area. I just want to comment that the notice that came out last September 2019-23 or Housing Notice 2019-9, that was very helpful, gave some very good information on how to approach that to be able to transition these folks in.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. We always like to hear from folks who have lived this world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have any other hands, but it looks like we've got a couple written in questions, so bear with me. Okay, we've got a question about OCAF adjustments. If they are not requested in a given year, can it be requested in a subsequent year? So if an owner skips 2 years, can they then ask for 3 OCAF in the third year? They did not specify if they're asking about PBV or PBRA. So I don't know if Belinda or Cheryl will, if one of you wants to tackle this one.
I think we've generally seen that if OCAFs have failed to be applied annually, it is a right under the contract, and that they are retroactively applied.
Thanks, Will. Okay, we have a question about our reserve for replacement withdrawals. It says, does a PHA, and this is a PBV question, does a PHA have to submit a form similar to that on the multifamily side to remove funds from the R4R account? So I think they're asking, is there a form for the PBV side for replacement reserve withdrawals?
Right. This is Cheryl. Well, so yes, there is a form. However, it isn't required. I think you'll probably find it useful, but it's not required to be used.
Great, thank you. Okay, this, Belinda, I think this is a question for you. It's for PBRA, a refinancing after the RAD conversion. They're asking what types of documents or information would be needed. Is it as lengthy as a TPA request or more similar to a HAP assignment?
So if it depends on the level of ownership change that is going to happen with the transaction. If there is a new ownership entity, we would do a HAP assignment as part of the refinance. A lot of times with tax credit transactions, there is a new ownership entity, even if it's a related entity to the existing owner, which would trigger the HAP assignment. If it is a conventional mortgage through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, HUD does not participate in the valuation of the loan. We would just provide you with generally you request the consent to the assignment of the HAP. If it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, they'll ask for that document as part of closing. So you need that process prior to closing. And if there's a change of ownership, we still have to do 2530, and it would be considered and modified or a full TPA or HAP assignment, I should say, if it's not an FHA insured mortgage. If it is an FHA insured mortgage, then we are also dealing with a payoff if you're refinancing. So if you reach out to your account executive, they can, prior to you getting too far into the transaction, they can provide you with guidance on what information the department needs specific to that transaction and the timeline for processing.
Great, thanks, Belinda.
Welcome.
And it looks like we have a hand raised, Samantha Wilson.
Leanne, I'm sorry. Could I interrupt just for 1 second? I'm sorry, just to finish up on that. I
Yeah.
do want to mention, this is Bev, just to remind everybody that once you have gone through the RAD conversion, the ownership requirements will apply. Ownership and control, right, Will? In any TPA.
Yes, that's right.
Good reminder. Thank you, Bev. All right, Samantha Wilson, I've unmuted you, but it looks like your phone might be muted on your end. Samantha, are you able to unmute your line? Okay, we'll come back to you. We have some more written questions.
Oh, am I unmuted now?
Oh, yes, hello, hey.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Samantha Wilson from Hessel, Eloise, and O'Leary here in DC. And I just had, well, first of all, I really like this post-conversion processing guide so far. What I've seen, I love the primary point of contact piece of it because I think that can be a point of confusion a lot of times. So thank you. And I have a couple just really quick questions. One of them, and this is a little bit more, I guess, in the weeds, just because it relates to a bifurcation of a PBRA contract, like a post-conversion PBRA, a couple years after the conversion. So I guess my first question is just, is there a standard set of documents that you guys are communicating to the field offices that you want to see to effectuate like bifurcations of those contracts, or is that kind of up to the particular lawyers that are working on said bifurcations?
So I can tell you that we are in the process of formalizing the bifurcation process. We're working on specific guidance that could be applied to a transaction that you're mentioning. So you will be seeing some written guidance on formalizing those documents.
And that would be, and you're saying that's across the board, not just for
Yes.
these? Oh, awesome. Okay. And then my other question is just, sorry about that. I'm just going to squeeze another one in here about just to circle back on that OCAP adjustment question that someone asked earlier. I assume that this works the same way, and this is again in the context of a bifurcation. I assume that this works the same way as it does for other HAP contracts, where you kind of do an early termination and renewal, and you have to skip one of your OCAF increases. So if you bifurcate and it's been less than a year since your last OCAF increase, the new contract that's created doesn't get an increase, from my understanding at the time that the contract is reset, the anniversary date. And then can they potentially catch up on that missed out OCAF increase on the 1 year anniversary of that bifurcation, or did they just miss one of their years? Does that make sense? Sorry, that was a little all over the place.
That does make sense. I'll venture, or I'll start an answer, but say we'll likely have to get back to you unless Belinda or Cheryl know this any better. One of the things that's unique about RAD is that it's actually in the bifurcation. It's not an early termination. It's not like a standard Section 8 where it's an early termination and a fresh renewal. Because the RAD statute authorizes the initial contract of 20 years. So it's treated more as administrative bifurcation of that contract into two that have the remaining left in them. But I don't know yet what the implications for that are for your question around whether OCAF increase gets missed or delayed, or how that works. I think we might need to think about that a little bit more. Again, unless Belinda or Cheryl have some more clarity there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just relates to, sorry, my question just relates to the fact that you're kind of resetting that anniversary date. So I was just wanting to put that question out there in the ether, and just for something to think about if you guys don't know off the top.
And this is Bev. I want to say that you could also put together some bullet points and send it to the RAD resource desk as a question, so that we can get back, so that, especially as like Will's saying, we're still, some of these things we're still working through. So that would give us some specifics about what's going on in your head about what you need to know.
Also, I dialed a friend who says that in the ones we've done so far, the anniversary date of the contract doesn't change. And so the OCAF does not get skipped.
Great.
Right, this is
Well,
Cheryl. I think your question was within the context of PBRA. Within PBV, it works, I believe, at least so far, it works as Will was saying, that the contract wouldn't actually reset. So there would be no need to miss an OCAF adjustment.
Okay.
And bifurcations, by the way, are a great example of a topic that's not covered in the current guide extensively, and where we know we need to create more instruction on that. And so, as Belinda said, that's actively done on the PBRA side, and is on the list of issues on the PBV side that need to be kind of better communicated.
all right. It looks like we've got a couple more written questions. This is a PBRA OCAF question. So Belinda, incoming. The question is, for PBRA, is the owner locked on to only the annual OCAF adjustment, or are they required to complete a rent comp study?
Ooh, I'd probably have to ask Will to help me with that.
Yeah, they're for the initial term of the contract, the rent increases can only be adjusted by the OCAF.
Thank you. We have a question about where they can find the name of their account executive for our RAD conversion. And I think Belinda mentioned there's a website, so we can circulate that after this call so everyone can go look that up if they need it. It looks like that is all of the written questions. And there are no more hands raised. Oh, there we go. We've got one more hand. Nellie, unmuting your line. There you go. Hi, Nellie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I also put the questions, but then probably didn't go through. But we are trying to assist a property owner through the process of the RAD conversion through the component 2. So this mod rehab property, and we've been having a hard time finding some resources, which but then similar to is kind of the quick reference guide, which kind of outlines basically everything from the start to end, and was just seeing if you can help point us in the right direction of where we can get those resources.
It sounds like that might be a question that we will write down and get back to you. Unless, Will, you've got any?
I think we'll have to get back to you on that. Again, you said that was a second component conversion?
Yes.
Okay. So the general answer is or why we haven't created a quick reference guide for the, as mod rehab or rent wrap or soon the properties convert, is because for the most part, they adhere fully to standard PBV or PBRA requirements, where there's and so there are not a lot of things that have changed in RAD or modified in order to facilitate the conversion. Whereas in public housing, there were some more substantial changes, and so we utilizing the appropriate handbooks and regs, we hope would be sufficient. But please let us know where you think the guidance is lacking.
And this is Bev. I just want to add on to that. This email that's showing now, the resource desk at radresource.net, I think that's also a good, that's what I was referring to before about if you have a specific question and you're really not sure who in RECAP to go to, that resource desk is monitored. It's by people who know the program and who know all of us in RECAP and who know where to, or they determine where to send the questions. So I really think you could find that very helpful to start there.
Great, thank you.
Because I don't know too much about the second component and what's happening. So because that's not the topic today, but that's a good place to start.
Great, thank you. All right, we've got a couple more written questions. Does the guide include information about Section 18 RAD blend process? For instance, are the Section 18 PBV funded immediately through Section 8? So the guide itself doesn't cover Section 18 RAD blends, but there is a standalone FAQ document on the resource desk that talks about the Section 18 RAD blend process. That would definitely be worth checking out. Will, is there anything else you would add?
No, I think that's the right resource. The FAQ's gone through 2 revisions now, and it's fairly thorough. So please let us know if there's anything on there that is, or anything that's not on there that would be helpful. Again, that's available on the RAD resource desk.
Thank you.
And additionally, and this would just be helpful for us to know what's missing. If you can't find it there, please contact the rad.pbv.request@hud.gov mailbox, and we will get it to somebody who can answer your question.
Thanks. All right, we've got one more typed in question here. It's about RAD PBRA conversions. Belinda, you'd mentioned earlier about a welcome letter going out to PHAs that includes everything they need to convert to PBRA. And the question is that something we can anticipate all PHAs getting as they convert going forward?
So I would anticipate the answer to that would be yes. But I would want to confirm that with Will. It should be going out, yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Are
So
we,
we give the
are we
field off.
talking about the quick reference guide or a different document?
No, this is the welcome letter. And I think it's part of the new internal SOPs that folks are doing. So I believe this is kind of solidified and everyone's going to be getting it going forward. That's the plan.
Yes, so we try to give the field office instructions on how they should process. So this will be included in those instructions.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Amanda. All right, we're right. We do have a couple other written questions that are a little transaction specific. So we haven't forgotten about you. We will send you an email to get back to you on those. But we are right at time. Bev, any final thoughts?
I want to thank everybody, and again, we're here to help, and use that email if you need to, and take a look at all the things we have posted. And good luck. We want you to be successful.
Great. Thank you. And again, this is recorded. The recording and slides will be posted within 48 hours on the RAD resource desk. So thanks everyone for joining.